You know you should leave. You've known it for a while. The relationship that drains you, but that you can't imagine ending. The job that's slowly hollowing you out, but that you keep showing up to. The friendship that makes you feel worse about yourself every time, but that you'd feel lost without. You've made the decision to leave, more than once probably, and then you didn't. And the most confusing part, the part that nobody talks about, is that you are not stupid. You are not weak. You understand the situation clearly, and you still can't go. Today we're going to explain why. Not with judgment, not with just leave advice that helps nobody, with the actual psychology of why intelligent, capable people stay in situations they know are damaging them. Because the answer is not about character, it's about the specific mechanisms that the human brain uses to keep you exactly where you are. Staying is not a decision, not in the way most people think. Psychologist Kurt Lewin's field theory describes behavior as a function of the person and their environment, not just their character or will. The environment of a damaging relationship, a toxic job, or a controlling community creates a specific psychological field, one in which leaving is not experienced as a neutral option available for rational consideration. It is experienced as a threat, and the brain does not make rational decisions in the presence of threat. It makes survival decisions. Here's the first mechanism, and it's one of the most powerful in human psychology. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman's research on loss aversion established that the pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the equivalent thing. But sunk cost in relationships and situations goes far deeper than money. You have invested years, emotional energy, identity, the narrative of who you are and what your life means. Leaving doesn't just mean losing the relationship, the job, the group. It means losing the years. It means acknowledging that the investment was wrong. It means the story you've been telling yourself and everyone around you about why you're here was not the story you thought it was. The brain experiences this as a catastrophic loss, not a clean exit to something better, a destruction of what already exists. And the brain will work very hard, generating hope, generating reasons, generating reinterpretations of damaging events to avoid that destruction. The sunk cost doesn't trap you because you're irrational. It traps you because loss aversion is one of the most fundamental features of how the human brain evaluates decisions. Here's the mechanism that explains why toxic situations are harder to leave than consistently bad ones. In the 1950s, behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered something about reward schedules that changed how we understand human and animal behavior. He found that behavior reinforced on a variable, unpredictable schedule, sometimes rewarded, sometimes not, is far more resistant to extinction than behavior reinforced consistently. The slot machine is the famous example. You don't keep pulling because it always pays out. You keep pulling because it sometimes does, unpredictably, without pattern. And toxic relationships, toxic jobs, and controlling environments almost always operate on exactly this schedule. They are not always bad. They cycle. Moments of warmth followed by withdrawal, recognition followed by criticism, connection followed by distance. The good version of this person, the one you fell for, the job that once felt meaningful, the community that once felt like home, appears often enough to maintain hope. And hope, in the presence of intermittent reward, is not rational. It is neurological. Dopamine, the brain's anticipation chemical, surges not when reward arrives consistently, but when reward arrives unpredictably. You are not waiting for things to get better because you're naive. You are addicted to the intermittent signal that they might. Here's the layer that most people don't see, because it's invisible from the inside. Over time, in any significant relationship or situation, the self reorganizes around that relationship or situation. Your identity, who you are, how you understand yourself, what your life means, becomes entangled with being in this thing. And leaving is no longer just leaving the external thing. It is leaving the version of yourself that was built around it. Psychologist William Swann's research on self-verification, the drive to confirm existing self-beliefs, shows that people actively seek environments that confirm who they believe they are, even when those beliefs are negative. The person who has come to believe they are someone who can handle this, who is loyal, who doesn't give up, who makes things work, will resist leaving because leaving contradicts that self-concept. The person who has come to believe they don't deserve better, a belief that toxic environments actively cultivate, will resist leaving because the better option doesn't fit their self-image. You don't stay because the situation is right. You stay because leaving would require not just a new situation, but a new self. And building a new self is one of the most psychologically demanding things a person can do. Here's the one that happens so slowly, you can't see it happening. Psychologist Martin Seligman's research on learned helplessness showed that animals and people exposed to repeated, inescapable negative experiences eventually stop trying to escape, even when escape becomes possible. But in toxic relationships and situations, the process is more subtle than clear inescapability. It is normalization. Each incident, each moment of cruelty, dismissal, manipulation, or control slightly recalibrates what feels normal. The first time something happens, it's clearly wrong. The 5th time, it's upsetting but not surprising. The 20th time, it has become the baseline. The brain is an adaptation machine. It adjusts its model of normal to match the environment it's in. And once the damaging behavior has been normalized, once it has become the baseline against which other experiences are measured, leaving requires arguing against the very definition of normal that the environment has installed. The person outside the situation says, "But that's not okay." The person inside the situation says, "That's just how things are." They are not defending the situation. They are reporting accurately on what normal has come to mean inside the field they're in. Here's the mechanism that's most deliberately engineered in the most damaging situations. Toxic environments, from abusive relationships to controlling organizations, almost universally reduce the resources available for leaving. Financial resources, social networks, information, self-confidence, the sense that the outside world is navigable. This is not always deliberate, but it is always systematic. The partner who manages the finances, the job that consumes so much time, there's no energy for a search. The community that becomes the entire social world, so that leaving means losing everyone. Psychologist Judith Herman's foundational research on trauma and recovery identified the systematic isolation of victims from support networks as a core feature of coercive control, not an accidental byproduct, but a functional strategy that makes leaving materially and psychologically harder, and crucially, the dependency that results feels, from the inside, like need, not control, need. You genuinely need this person because you have been systematically separated from other sources of support. You genuinely can't afford to leave this job because the financial structure has made that true. You genuinely have nowhere to go because the social world has been progressively narrowed to this community. The trap is real. The dependency is real. The resources to leave have been reduced, sometimes deliberately, sometimes structurally, to the point where leaving is not just emotionally difficult, it is practically difficult. Here's the mechanism that keeps everything in place. Hope, not naivety, not stupidity. Hope, the specific psychological state of believing that the future could be better than the present, is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. And in damaging situations, hope is systematically manufactured. Moments of genuine goodness, promises of change, periods of improvement that confirm the hope was correct, that the investment was right, that leaving would have been a mistake. Psychologist Beck's research on cognitive distortions, the thinking patterns that maintain depression and anxiety, identified what he called selective abstraction, focusing on one element of a complex situation while ignoring others. In toxic situations, selective abstraction means focusing on the good moments, the promises, the potential, and minimizing or explaining away the pattern. But here's the most important thing about hope in toxic situations. It is not wrong to have had it. The hope was based on real evidence. The good moments were real. The promises were sometimes genuine. The problem was not that you hoped. The problem was that hope was used. by the situation, by the person, by your own brain's preference for positive interpretations to override the pattern. And pattern is what matters, not moments. Pattern. So here's what's actually happening when you can't leave. Your brain is calculating a catastrophic loss in the sunk cost. It is responding to an intermittent reward schedule with neurological addiction. It is defending an identity built around staying. It is working with a definition of normal that has been recalibrated by exposure. It is genuinely dependent on resources that have been systematically reduced. And it is sustained by hope that is real but selective. None of these mechanisms are stupidity. None of them are weakness. They are the predictable, documented responses of a normally functioning human brain to a specific set of conditions. The person who just leaves easily was in different conditions, not a stronger person, different conditions. And understanding this matters, not as an excuse to stay, but as the beginning of accurate self-knowledge, because you cannot navigate out of something you don't understand. Here's what the research says about leaving. Most people who successfully leave damaging situations do not do it in a single dramatic decision. They do it gradually, with support, with a growing body of evidence that they refuse to explain away, with the slow rebuilding of resources, financial, social, psychological, that make the outside feel survivable. The first step is almost never leaving. The first step is usually naming what is actually happening, not the story that makes it acceptable, the pattern underneath the story. The second step is finding one person, one source of perspective outside the situation, someone whose information environment is different from the one you've been in, not to be told to leave, but to have access to a perspective that the environment you're in has been systematically removing. The third step, which often takes longer than it should, and that's okay, is rebuilding the resources, the identity, and the sense of the outside world that make leaving feel possible rather than annihilating. You don't have to decide today, but you are allowed to start understanding. If this video describes something you're living, share it with someone who needs to understand why they can't leave. And subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the behaviors, the patterns, the things about being human that nobody explains.